I was a youngster in Cleveland, I first became aware of the name bands when I heard Glenn Gray and his Casa Loma Orchestra on a radio broadcast. I must say it was a great thrill.
This week I'll be looking at the 1962 album by Ray Anthony called Ray Anthony Plays Worried Mind, the soul of country western blues. And somehow I don't think it's an accident that this album came out just a few months after Ray Charles released Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music. They even have 6 songs in common, including the title track. I'm pretty sure I haven't heard a whole lot of Ray Anthony up to now, except for one pretty notable exception. But before I fire up the old hi-fi, let's go over some stuff I learned. Here are the 5 things for Ray Anthony. Ray Anthony was born Raymond Antonini on January 20th, 1922, to Italian immigrant parents. Originally from Bentleyville, Pennsylvania, the family moved to Cleveland when Ray was young, where he first started learning trumpet. Towards the end of his high school days, he had his own band for a while, but in 1940, at the age of 18, he joined the Glenn Miller Orchestra. Ray was in the Glenn Miller Orchestra for 2 years, 40 and 41. This means he wouldn't have been on the recording of In the Mood from 39, but he would have been on Pennsylvania 65000,
Pennsylvania 65000,
Chattanooga Choo Choo, 5 o'clock whistle,
5 o'clock whistles on the blink. The whistle won't blow, and what do you think? My papa's still in the factory, 'cause he don't know what time it happens to be.
It means he also would have been there when the Glenn Miller Orchestra makes appearances in the 1941 movie Sun Valley Serenade. It's a weird bit of culture starring Norwegian figure skater Sonja Henie.
So radiant, so beautiful, so romantic with John Payne.
And believe it or not, Ray Anthony is still with us today. He just celebrated his 103rd birthday last week. That makes him the last living member of the Glenn Miller Orchestra. The guy's on Facebook and Twitter. It's kind of crazy, right? During his service in the Navy in World War II, Ray led his own big band and continued it after his service, eventually resulting in some chart success in the early 50s. The Ray Anthony Orchestra had an early hit in 51 with The Bunny Hop and its B-side Hokey Pokey, which I'm sure made all the wedding receptions of the early 50s just that much more cringy. And again in 1952 with his cover of At Last, which peaked at number 2. But where he found his biggest success was in music for radio and television. If there's one Ray Anthony original I'm fairly positive you've heard, it's the theme from Dragnet. And because Ray Anthony was working so closely with radio and television, opportunities for on-screen appearances started to materialize for himself and for his orchestra. You can see him perform in Daddy Longlegs starring Fred Astaire and Leslie Caron. This Could Be the Night starring Gene Simmons.
He's the one, all right. Almost tore my arm off.
No, not that Gene Simmons. And The Girl Can't Help It starring Mamie Van Doren.
The girl can't help it. She was born.
And in fact, in 1955, Ray Anthony and Mamie Van Doren were married. Ooh, celebrity wedding. What would their couple name be? It's got to be Ramey, right? And this led to his acting career. By 1956, he was getting roles in major releases like High School Confidential, The Five Pennies, The Beat Generation.
They call you Beat Generation.
And even though Ray and Mamie divorced in 1958, they starred together in one more film in 1959, one of many juvenile delinquent themed movies around that time. This one was called Girls Town. It also had Paul Anka, Eleanor Donahue, and of all things, Mel Torme as the bad guy. Not just any bad guy, a bad guy named Fred. But the reason why Girls Town will always be my favorite Ray Anthony movie is because it appears on Season 6, Episode 1 of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
I'm just a lonely boy.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the 5 things for Ray Anthony. Time to give Ray Anthony Plays Worried Mind a spin. Back soon with First Impressions.
And through a set of circumstances, auditions here and there, I was with Al Donahue's band. And you get into that circle, then the other band leaders hear about you.
Right.
And they called me over for an audition at the Cafe Rouge, the Pennsylvania Hotel in New York. And he hired me.
All right, guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but this record is, all right, brace yourself, easy listening. For real, this is some elevator grade, Lawrence Welk approved dentist office easy listening. I mean, of all the amazing things that happened in 1962, Crying by Roy Orbison. Coltrane by John Coltrane. Full House by Wes Montgomery. Go by Dexter Gordon. Bob Dylan's debut album.
New York Times said it was the coldest winter in 17 years. I didn't feel so cold then.
The Dice decided that the thing I need to hear is an easy listening collection of country songs done in full orchestra big band arrangements with the trumpet in place of the vocals. Before I get into the individual songs, let me start by describing the overall sound of this album, because there's a lot of things that all of the songs have in common. First, there's a big string section, largely playing long legato chords with occasional flourishes and sweeteners. And beneath the strings is a barely audible bass and drums, and I mean barely. Half the time, I was convinced that the occasional stepped hi-hat I was hearing was just wishful thinking. And then there's the country element, right? It's a piano played Floyd Kramer Slipnote style. Though I am sure all the comping that was played on the piano was rigorously composed and charted, this music does not strike me as being very welcoming to improvisation. And on top of this creamy bed of musical jello salad, you have two featured elements. A chorus of Ray Conniff-style backing singers, and Ray Anthony's big brassy glissando heavy trumpet. So with this kind of idea in mind, let's point out some of the things I'm hearing in these songs. When Worried Mind starts, you'd be excused if you thought they were about to launch into Danny Boy. But after the rubato intro, the song is just 3 times through the song form, once led by trumpet, once by piano, and a second time with trumpet on the chorus at the end singing Your Worried Mind right at the end. The only derivation from this song form in Weary Blues from Waitin' is the second time through is handled by guitar instead of piano. And the third time is handled by the male half of the chorus. I gotta say, hearing this particular chorus of voices all sing Oh Sweet Mama Please Come Home, complete with the little faux yodel in the middle, it's pretty dang funny.
Oh sweet mama, please come home.
More than any other element, it was the vocal chorus that made me smile on this first spin, not only for the incongruity of the delivery, but also because they occasionally interject partial song lyrics, as if the trumpet was busily singing away and the chorus was just repeating the last line sung. There's a really good one of those on I Can't Stop Loving You. Out of nowhere, the chorus just interjects. And if there was any doubt about the fact that Ray Anthony was deliberately making this album as a response to the popularity of modern sounds in country music by Ray Charles, towards the end of I Can't Stop Loving You, you can hear...
Now let's hear it from Mr. Charles, children.
The most amusing thing to me about this version of Your Cheatin' Heart is the 6 identical behind-the-beat trumpet blasts with identical leading glissando. The third pass through the form of Born to Lose has the most hilarious vocal incongruity on the album, I think. You know, I don't think they meant that. But a close second is the oh-so-bluesy You Nearly Lose Your Mind. Ray Anthony actually tried to arrange a down-and-dirty country blues tune for strings and chorus. And the result is, oh my goodness. Oh Careless Love actually feels like both trumpet and guitar are doing some actual improvisation. So that's kind of cool. The one and only reason I can think of for why the chorus is singing in straight eighths against a swing rhythm in half as much is because it was charted in eighths, right? Rather than triplets, and they just didn't know how to feel the swung eighths. Certainly both Hank Williams and Ray Charles knew how to swing those. And let me tell you, it took 100% of my focus and attention to highlight these few things. Ray Anthony Plays Worried Mind is not an album that nails you to your seat and demands that you crank up the volume. No, this is an album that says half price on Prel shampoo, aisle 7. But look, I've been surprised in the past. It's entirely possible that listening for a week will kindle something that I can't even imagine just now. Anyway, those are my first impressions. Back soon with final thoughts.
Great melody, you keep playing that melody. It's like Marilyn Monroe. She's like a standard that we measure everything else by.
Y'all know this book? It's Heroes of Blues, Jazz, and Country by R. Crumb. Get a copy if you can. The book is just a collection of single-page descriptions of artists from the early days of what we know today as American music, starting with the turn of the last century and going to the 30s, organized into 3 sections: blues, jazz, and country. The book also comes with a CD with tunes by the Memphis Jug Band, King Oliver, Doc Boggs,
Oh, I've got no sugar baby now.
a bunch of others. If you play the CD on shuffle, you'd be surprised by how many times you find yourself wondering, wait, is this supposed to be blues, country, or jazz? Because, folks, they all started from the same place. And through the years, all the artists were all fans of each other. Muddy Waters used to love singing cowboy songs by Gene Autry. Jimmy Rogers recorded an album with Louis Armstrong. The only real difference early on was who was listening to the sides, poor black people or poor white people. But just like with everything else, isolation leads to branching evolution, and over time the stylistic differences began to widen. But that never stopped the artists themselves from loving the good stuff, no matter where it came from. Bo Diddley was a fan of Tennessee Ernie Ford, for example. And of course, Ray Charles released 2 volumes of country music in the early 60s that both became classics. But there was another side to the cross-genre intermingling of the 50s and 60s, right? And that was white artists trying to cash in on music made popular by black artists. And seeing as Ray Anthony released this album just a few months after Ray Charles released his, I cannot help but wonder if that's what's happening here. But I mean, even in that phenomenon, right, of people covering hits and re-releasing them, there are levels of perniciousness. I mean, Lever and Stoller sold Hound Dog to Big Mama Thornton in 1952. She gets a hit from it. Elvis covers it in 1955, before he was Elvis, just a poor musician from Mississippi. That's one thing. Pat Boone covering Tutti Frutti, that's another. And I'm not sure where Ray Anthony lands on that spectrum. On one hand, this album feels very much like it's pandering, like it's trying to repackage some of the scary hillbilly music into a format that middle-class white suburban housewives would find acceptable. And on the other hand, well, I mean, the guy got his break with Glenn Miller, and he's still kicking today. I kind of want to pull for him, you know what I mean? I want him to be the good guy in this. I want very much for my aversion to this music to be a product of my upbringing and not a fatal flaw in its conception or execution. Honestly, though, I think my deciding factor might be Mamie Van Doren. In the divorce, she cited cruelty as the reason for their separation. And even though I was not able to find any other evidence that Ray Anthony might have been a bad dude, I'm having a hard time letting that little fact go. That, and I cannot conceive how anyone thought it was a good idea to take the one thing country music does best, its story-based lyrics, and replace them with a trumpet. So that just leaves my 5-word review of Ray Anthony Plays Worried Mind. Easy listening isn't always easy. Now let's see what I'll be listening to next. As usual, we'll start with the year. 1943. Okay, I knew this would happen eventually. Let's talk about the Billboard charts in the 40s. This is what they looked like. there was several different charts, starting with the song with the most radio plugs. And in that one, you will have sometimes where you'd have a tie for different positions. In addition to that, there were national best-selling retail records, and they were broken up regionally. So there was East, South, Midwest, West Coast, all of these different regions, but there was also a national top 10. And beyond all of that, there was the Harlem Hit Parade. So what I'm going to do is the number one for the nationals for this week and month. So, second week of February, the number one song is I Had the Craziest Dream by Harry James and his orchestra with Helen Forrest. From one big band to another. Wild. These dice are telling an interesting story, seems to me. Well, the singles collection that includes I Had the Craziest Dream that most closely sticks to this time frame is Trumpets After Midnight. So that's my next album. Thanks for hanging out with me, everyone. I'll see you next week.